Okay, welcome back everyone. Gonna have one more grammar video here just to talk about this last little piece of the chapter about pronouns and indirect statement and how they work together and what exactly happens in the dependent clauses in the indirect statement when you use these different types of pronouns. So we're just gonna recall back to our different types of indirect pronouns that we've seen so far. So we have these, or just normal pronouns. We have our um, reflexive pronouns that always refer back to the subject of whoever is using this. Whether it's say or suis, sua, suum, all of those different forms, they always refer back to the subject of the verb of whatever's happening. And that's in contrast to our more general demonstrative pronouns, eam, eam, id, eos, eos, and ea. I gave all of the neuter, I gave all of the accusative forms because those are the most important ones for this indirect statement. But in this situation, they always refer to someone else, whether we're using them in the genitive or in the accusative. When it's referring to possession, this is one of our main rules for refor is that when you have eis or eorum referring back to, it refers back to someone else. But when you have suis or one of its forms, it refers back to the main subject. So what we're going to see then is that in indirect statement, the same relationship works. It just is slightly modified to account for the changes in indirect statement. Namely that the subject then is going to be in the accusative case, going with the rule of how the accusative and infinitive constructions work for this type of indirect statement. So let's just take a look at these two examples and talk about some different ways that this can change and different things that can happen in this. So we'll look at the reflexive one first. So the idea here is that the farmer, he said something. So if we look back, I'll just draw a little arrow real quick just to re-emphasize the relativity of the action. We have dixit, which is at some point in the past. We also have amawasa, so he loved. And since this is our perfect active infinitive, we also know that this loving is taking place it's in some point further back than when he said this. So that's our basic relative time construction here. But we'll also take a look at what exactly our pronouns are doing here, and what work they're carrying out and telling and giving us information about for this sentence. So the farmer said that he, she, or it. So say is our accusative singular pronoun here, the reflexive pronoun. And then our accusative pronoun also takes this verb as an infinitive. So this is our typical indirect statement construction: accusative subject and infinitive verb. He loved, so at some point in the past, his own pigs. And this is our typical way of referring to so our reflexive adjective here is used in the plural because it modifies our noun, but it still refers back to this agricola, this farmer who did this, as well as our reflexive pronoun too. It still refers back to this point. So the farmer said that he loved his pigs. So if we wanted to say this then in direct statement, this would be something like he, that is, so is, meaning him, that is the farmer, loved porcos, suos, amawat. So just he loved his pigs. That's the relationship going on here. Okay, now let's take a look at this next version, and I just switched a few things around here. So the farmer said, so we still have our perfect tense here and our perfect infinitive, but he said that he, i.e. some other person, so am does not refer back to Agricola, but refers to someone else. Loved his pigs. So in this case, neither of these two pronouns are referring back to Agricola. So the farmer is just the person reporting this information, but he isn't necessarily saying that he loved his own pigs, but that some other guy, maybe it's a pirata, some other guy loved his pigs, but they weren't the farmer's pigs, they were the pirate's pigs. So this is really the sort of main difference between these two statements. Say and sue us always refer back to the subject of the independent statement outside of indirect statement, whereas eum, eus, eorum, all of these different forms, they always refer to someone else. It isn't necessarily the person who's doing the speaking, but it's someone else that isn't necessarily named. So if we had something like a piratam earlier on or at some other point in the sentence, then this could naturally reflect back to this pirata. The pirate wasn't the one who said this statement. It's the farmer who said it, but the relationship is still there. So that's basically the idea to how this works. So let's just take a look at one more example just to get a really firm understanding of how this works. So we have the king instead of a farmer this time. He said that he killed the queen. So if we take a look at our arrow again, we still have a past time verb here, dixit, but we also have another perfect infinitive here. So at some point in the past, the king said that he, at some earlier point, had killed the queen. So this is when the killing took place, and this is when the saying took place. So relatively in time, this is how it works. But because we use the word say here instead of something like eum or it, or it could be it, or it could be eam, could be eos, could be, a group of people, but we know that since it's say, it has to refer back to Rex. So the subject, then the king, is the one who did the killing. So this is in contrast to our second example here, where the king said that this other guy killed the queen. So eum could refer to anyone else. It could be any other person referred to earlier or even someone unmentioned. But the one thing we do know is that it isn't the king. The king did not do the killing. Someone else did the killing of the queen. So that is essentially how our pronouns work. They work quite similarly to how we saw with our adjectives before, but this relationship between say referring back to the subject versus our demonstratives referring back to someone else as the key idea here. So hopefully that helped you understand that a bit more clearly. All right, thanks.